Hello, Spurs fans, and welcome, my friends. Today, I'm actually bringing this video because I do see a lot of similarities between Jose's time at Tottenham and so far Conte's time at Tottenham. And basically, there's a lot of disgruntlement in the fan base due to formation, due to team selection, down to style of play, and basically just sort of criticizing Conte really on everything that the guy does. And also on the transfer window, and our fan base is actually very, very divided right now on a lot of these issues. And if you'd be gracious enough, I'd love to maybe give my thoughts on it and just maybe call for a bit of patience from Spurs fans. Now, the last few years, guys, has been absolutely helter-skelter. It's been hectic. We've had the heights of the Champions League final, to the lows of Poch being sacked, to Jose being hired, to Jose being sacked 6 days before a cup final, to hire a Nuno, then to Conte's heroics last season. It's been absolutely full of drama and non-stop football. And sometimes, rather than being caught up in the immediate focus and everything else that's going on in the immediate, sometimes you just need to take yourself outside of the situation and look in and give yourself an absolute different perspective before maybe you start giving out about the style of play, the formations, basically the team selections and all this sort of stuff, and basically just show a bit of patience. Now, we as Spurs fans, I get it, we absolutely adore and love this great football club. And we have all of our opinions of how to end up being successful, how to be the best team in world football, how to deliver trophies, and rightly so. And I encourage everybody to never, ever lose that. But sometimes our love and our passion can cloud our judgment. And sometimes you do need to take a step back and just look in from the outside. Now, from here on out, I will be sort of reading off my thoughts. I put them down earlier on, and basically what sparked this is I was having a conversation with the father earlier on about Tottenham. Good conversation about everything that's gone on, really, about everything that's going on now. I seen Matt Doherty's quotes today about the Jose time, which really angered me. Since then, I've calmed down, but I will share my thoughts on that as well. And just a lot of what's going on in the fan base at the minute and the opinions on Antonio Conte. And, some people basically saying, oh, I'd love to have Poch back, this, that, and the other. So I've tried to structure as best as I can. And I'm actually going to start with Jose Mourinho. Now, we have been here before under Jose. Again, I would say moaning about the style of play, moaning about the formations, moaning about the team selection, saying another manager will come in here and play more attractive football, saying he was outdated. It doesn't work in modern football. Constantly criticizing everything he'd done, and fans' impatience basically led to Jose being sacked, along with some of them players in the squad at the time. Now, we gave the fans the wish. We gave the players the wish, and we tried something new. Now, many fans at the time were calling for Nagelsmann. They thought we could just sack Jose Mourinho, and Nagelsmann will leave and walk straight in here, even though his next step was Bayern Munich or Real Madrid, and ended up going to Bayern Munich. And we ended up with Nuno Espirito Santo. Now, we all know how that went. Started off like a house on fire, first 3 games. Ultimately, the players weren't having them. The people around the club weren't having them. And the fans weren't having them. And it was simply because it was even more defensive. We created even less chances. And it was just became a major problem. And basically, the grass was not greener on the other side. Now, we're at a point now where we may think the grass is greener on the other side. But it may not be either. And this is what I will urge the Spurs fans to listen to my point of view. And basically, what I will end up saying all the way through this. Now, at the time of Jose's sacking, instead of giving Jose real time to change the mindset, the culture, the DNA of the club, the fans and the club chose to protect their investments, which is logical, which is what most businesses do, which is what most football clubs do, because basically it's cheaper to change a manager than it is a squad. But ultimately, for me, which I'll get onto, it's the squad, and it's something that's going to take time, and we just have to accept this. But look, at the end of the day, we ultimately got it wrong. We got it wrong. Our 2 best players, Kane and Son, they ended up becoming the most deadliest duo in the Premier League. They formed a real partnership. We were top of the league for a while until basically players couldn't handle the pressure and crumbled. i.e. Bergwijn and people like that. We got to a League Cup final under Jose Mourinho, but he didn't get a chance to play it, sacked 6 days before it. And ultimately, we just chose to ignore the signs that, as yes, there were some bad signs there. Certain players who maybe were on the periphery of Poch's squad at the time, certain players that were brought in here have since gone because they've had bad attitudes. We chose to protect them. And we chose to put it all on Jose Mourinho. And I get it. The manager's paid to be the front guy. He's paid to be the fall guy. But sometimes we have to be smarter than that. We chose to ignore that. There were actually signs, like I said, top of the league for a while, League Cup final, Son and Kane forming a formidable partnership. There were signs there that it could have easily went in the right direction. Now, I'm not saying Jose got it absolutely all right. He didn't. But what managers do get it all right. Some managers do make mistakes, but they're given time to learn from them. And basically, as reference to what I'm saying, I'm going to use Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. He took over in 2015. They lost to West Brom. But Klopp still made the players go over to the crowd and do the grab the hands and give the pump up to the crowd and stuff like that. And ultimately, were mocked for it. And he could have been sacked within the first year or two. But they chose to stick by the guy. They chose to back him. They chose to give him multiple windows to build a squad that was ultimately entirely his, to allow him to stamp his DNA, his culture, his philosophy on the team. And they gave him more than what we gave Jose Mourinho, which was 11 months or which was 17 months in the job. They gave Klopp more than what we're currently giving Conte, because so far he's 11 months in and we're already on his case. And ultimately, they got the reward. They went on to win absolutely everything in club football that a club can possibly win. So, I mean, he delivered their first league title in 30 years. So the proof is in the pudding there. It takes longer than the time we're giving people. We were saying things like we can play better football with what we have. If we're going to lose, we want to do it the Spurs way or lose playing exciting football. But first of all, we actually really need to take stock of where we're at right now. So let's look at the squad. It's basically a mix when you're looking at it, and I'm going to break it down. Poch, Jose, Nuno, and Conte players. That's 4 different managers and 4 different regimes. And in some cases, not necessarily the best from the previous managers. And what's left in this squad right now of Pochettino, Harry Kane, Son, Hugo, Skip, Mora. And then you go on to Dyer, Davies, and Sanchez, which cause many divisive opinions amongst the fan base. Then you go into Jose. You still got Højbjerg, Doherty, Sessegnon, Tanganga. That's another 4. Then you go into Nuno. There's Royale, Gil, Romero, Sarr. That's another 4. And then you got Conte, Richarlison, Perisic, Bentancur, Kulu, Forrester, Spence, Basuma, Lenglet. Not to mention a lot more of the signings made under Jose, loaned out. In Ndombele's case, the Celso's case, Joe Rodon's case, Sergi Reguilon's case, and then obviously you got Winks from the Poch era. So if we add them all up, that's 9 from Poch era, that's 8 from Jose's era, 4 from Nuno's era, and 8 from Conte's era. The point I'm trying to make basically that is Conte's squad is it's a mix of the last 4 regimes. Conte has only been here 11 months. He's not had the time to fully shape the squad to the majority, being his players, basically, to fully implement his style, his philosophy, his DNA, his culture. Now, I'm not saying, what I'm going to use is I'm going to use Sir Alex Ferguson as an example here. He was nearly sacked until he decided to do things his way at Man United. And when he finally did, he went on to win 38 trophies in 26 years. Now, I'm not sitting here saying we're going to have that amount of success, but to give us any chance of having any sort of success, it takes time. It takes longer than 1 year in the job. The proof is in the pudding, as per the examples I've used. You have to give a manager 3 to 4 years to build a winning culture, a DNA. It's not all about throwing money at it, even though that obviously increases your chance and it does help. It makes it a lot easier. There are other components that makes it happen that we actually have to consider. Like I said, like giving a manager a bit of time to have a squad that's fully his, transfers that are his, rather than having a mix of squad over 4 different regimes. He needs more than 2 transfer windows. He needs more time. like Klopp was given at Liverpool, like Ferguson was given at United, which ultimately led to successful eras for both managers. So for me, this is what I'm saying. Conte has had 2 windows, 11 months in the job. He can't fix everything. It takes time, people. Now, at some stage, we will unanimously actually have to get behind the manager, whether that's us ultimately unanimously getting behind the guy we love, or we could end up being forced after hiring and firing. Look what Arsenal ended up doing. Mikel Arteta. And okay, it's going right now and everyone's behind it. But for the last while, they haven't been. They haven't been up until this season. And the guy was ultimately forced, the fans were forced to put up with him, but the board stuck with him, gave him time, let him mold the squad in his sort of philosophy, his style of play and everything else, his players. And now they're starting to see the benefits of it. So one way or another, we're going to actually have to get behind some sort of manager. Now, we can basically, we can do that under someone, who might come in here, he might play a better brand of football, but ultimately doesn't have the know-how to win trophies. Or we could do it under Antonio Conte, who has a trophy cabinet full of them, which are bursting to come out. He's actually struggling to contain them in his cabinet. So ultimately, you make that choice. We can either gamble or we can go with a proven track record of Antonio Conte. So for me, I'd pick absolutely Antonio Conte all day long. Now, I do get the impatience maybe from Spurs fans. It does come from a place of pain. It's been way too long without any sort of meaningful trophy around here. And we all want our club to be the best. And so we should. But the anguish is basically bursting out from all sides now. And if we're not careful, we will make such noise around Conte that he'll ultimately end up being sacked. And as proven before, the grass is not always greener on the other side. Now, what we actually need right now is a bit of patience, a bit of stability. Conte cannot do it all in 11 months, 2 transfer windows, like I keep saying. We need to give him time and more transfer windows. If we give him a new contract, fans have to show him patience. They have to. We've had a best start since 1963. Conte has pulled us from Europa Conference League, from 8th in the league to 4th in the Premier League and Champions League football. Give it some patience. My dad actually said something to me earlier on that kind of stuck with me. He's like, look at Conte. He's breathing life. Whether it's passion, whether it's anger, whether it's smiling. He's living. He's loving the challenge that Tottenham is giving him right now. Now, whether he continues to love it is a different story. But he's right. You can see it. There's life in the guy. He absolutely loves the job he's doing here. So it's important we give him a new contract, but it's also important that fans show him a bit of patience, give him a bit of time. Now, like I said, I'm not telling you how to support the club. I'm just giving my thoughts on what I'm seeing, just calling for a bit of patience, because where we're at right now, we could very easily, one wrong move after Conte, we could very, very easily slip right back to where we were, which was a club in decline, a club in Europa Conference League, soon to be falling further from the Europa Conference League, further down the Premier League table. And eventually, we'll end up losing if we're not careful. Regardless of your thoughts on Daniel Levy and Enoch, we will actually end up losing the 2 best people at our club right now. The 2 things that are really, really helping the club. The 2 things that are everything good about our club, which is Paratici and Antonio Conte. So we have to weigh that up as well. We have to weigh that up before we start saying and moaning about the style of football, which I'm going to get into on a bit of the style of football now. But in order to do that, I have to take Matt Doherty's comments, which I've seen today, on the Jose era. Now, this is what actually sparked me into life to do this video, along with a conversation I actually had with the Owl Lad earlier on about everything that's going on. And basically, Conte's thoughts are Jose Mourinho, Matt Doherty's comments on Jose Mourinho. Basically, he said, I let him down. People think he was bad for me, but it was the other way around. He put a lot of faith in me, and I didn't really perform. I just didn't play well. I just didn't grasp it. I don't know. Now, as I call at the time, Jose was not the problem, and we were doing the same. We're doing the same with Conte now. Some of these players need to be held accountable. Someone needs to tell Matt Doherty as well that he's not even performing well right now either. And look, ultimately, we end up wondering why Why we've seen some of the performances we've seen at Man United the other night at Old Trafford. It's absolutely not good enough. Now, I know some people are going to say, oh, well, Doherty's showing accountability 2 years too late. At the time, he chose to hide behind Jose. He chose to hide behind the club and other players. It's cowardly, it's weak, and it's spineless. He could have came out at the time and said, hang on, guys, I'm not playing to my best. I just can't grasp it. Give me a bit of time. But he didn't dare do that. He hid behind absolutely everything that was going on. Now, on this, I also see a certain pattern emerging. Now, Hugo Lloris, you expect it from his club captain. But over the last while, I've seen Eric Dyer in the press talking. We've seen Ben Davies. Now, players for me that shouldn't really have any right of being in the press talking, and not really players that fans want to hear from, considering, Ben Davies, which I'm going to get on to now, his quotes after the Vitesse game. And look, we can sit here and we can blame Conte for Old Trafford. But let me just read out the quotes here from Ben Davies after the Vitesse loss. He said, it was a very tough game for us. Now, tough. It's one of the weakest European oppositions you can face. It's a tough atmosphere to play in. Well, of course, you're away from home. I mean, that's a given. And we didn't give the best account of ourselves. No, obviously, we ended up losing the game. He says the effort was there, but it was a shame the way it ended. It was tough to get going. Most of us needed minutes, and it was a good opportunity to get them. The result was not what we wanted, but we have to go again. I mean, how many times have we heard that? And then he rounds it off with, I don't think the pitch helped. We didn't have any decisions going our way. Now, look, the decisions I sympathise with. I complain about the referees a lot myself. But are we really wondering why we played at Old Trafford the way we did when we have players playing who blame the atmosphere, blame the fans even though he's playing away from home? The guy was one excuse short of blaming my mother's cooking. They cry for minutes to get them, and then they don't take them, and then they shrug it off like it's nothing, and we go again. I mean, again, it's weak, it's spineless. The hardest thing to do in life is look at yourself in the mirror. When things aren't going well or stuff like that, the hardest thing to do is look at yourself. The easiest thing to do, though, is make excuses. Now, Doherty making excuses, Davies making excuses. I've heard it from Dyer. I've heard it from, look, Lloris, I do have issues around his captaincy, but you expect it from me. He's your captain, but I've heard it from him. I'm absolutely sick and tired of it. We also have to understand, we still have certain players here that just mentally do not have the right mentality. Rather than giving us the excuses in the press, do it on the pitch where it actually matters. Again, when we have players blaming atmosphere, the pitch, and absolutely everything else around. By the way, who started against Man United? Eric Dyer has been in the press over the last couple of years giving excuses. Started against Man United. Matt Doherty now giving out excuses now. Well, not excuses, now coming out 2 years after Jose being sacked and basically saying it was his fault, but wouldn't do it at the time. Are we surprised we turned up with the performance we did against Man United? The reason why we see, and I'm not going to say about the results. Results have been decent this year. But I will talk about the performances, and they've been very up and down. But do we wonder why when players are making excuses like that? It just shows that where their mentality is at. It is nowhere near good enough to be at a football club like Tottenham Hotspur. The mentality also in the squad right now is showing. You see some great performances, Conte's mentality. You see some crap performances, and usual, the culprits who make excuses in the press, they end up playing, and there's a clear drop-off in performances. These guys, some of these guys are also responsible for the problems we've had in defence over the last few years, for how bad we've looked in the last few years, for how far we've dropped. Now, Kane and Son's numbers haven't changed. They've still assisted goals. They've still scored goals. But what did change from the Poch era was the amount of goals we were shipping. And that just comes down to a quality issue, a mentality issue. Now, on the quality-wise, they're just not efficient enough. They're just not quick enough. And they're just not consistent enough with the basics of football, which is trap a ball and pass it. Now, if we want to play the modern way, which is building out from the back, we've got to have players that can do that, even though they're being pressed. Now, at Tottenham, we have a big problem right now. You look back at some of the results this year. Chelsea away, we got a draw, but we also got played off the pitch. They just pressed us. Press that back line. Same as West Ham's goal came from them. Pressing our back line. Hugo Lloris couldn't find his pass. Man United, all they done was press us. Sporting pressed us. You know, and we're having a real issue against teams that really do come up and sort of pressure us. It's a new issue. It's a new issue we're having this year. And even Arteta said it in his documentary, The All or Nothing. You know, Tottenham make a couple of passes across the back line. They play themselves into trouble, press. And the reason why they do that is because they know these guys are erratic. They panic. They can't do it consistently enough. They switch off. Ultimately, the mistake ends up coming. And they know there's a goal there for them because of it. And we've seen that so far this season. And I'm going to throw Sanchez in here. A lot of these guys, you know, have been backups. Doherty started for a while under Jose. Ultimately ended up being backup to Serge Aurier for a little bit. Came in here, was backup to Emerson under Conte. Conte didn't even want him. Dyer, backup under Pochettino. Found his way into the squad as a centre-half by default. Because Toby and Jan were shipped on. They were too old. They were past it. Davies has been brought in from left back to left side of centre back, but for the 7 years he's been here, he's constantly been on the periphery. And although Pochettino rotated him with Danny Rose at left back, ultimately when Davies came in, you can't deny it. There was a drop off in attacking quality down that side. These guys just technically are not good enough to be at Tottenham, and also mentally not good enough to be at Tottenham. They were on the periphery of the Poch squad. They were a massive part of the reason and the crumble under Jose. Like the amount of goals we started to ship under Jose. And who formed them? The back line? Dyer, Davies, Sanchez, Doherty. You know? When we see performances like we've seen at Man United and some of the goals we're conceding, we ask ourselves why. We blame Conte. Very quick to go and blame the manager. But we won't sit here and hold some of these players accountable as well. Some of these players absolutely have to be held accountable. Their mentality, their mistakes is just not good enough. They need to be more consistent to play at a club like Tottenham Hotspur. And that's why, in my opinion, our performances are so up and down. Because even if we get an injury, we try to rotate. These guys end up coming in. And it's just a drop-off altogether in quality. And it's not good enough. And look, ultimately, in my opinion, and I've been screaming about this, I said it all last season, all summer long, people made excuses. And I said to them, don't tell me about Wolves or Nottingham Forest who can't buy goals. Talk to me when it's against the bigger teams, when it becomes costly. And guess what? It has. Now, I get we adore these guys. We love them. They represent us. But we can't be naive to their flaws either. We have not done a more significant investment in that backline. And I'm going to get on to why I think, you know, everything else kind of crumbled around in that United game. But the only player we've brought in here, especially in centre-back, is Romero, who we've paid for. But Langley on loan, who keeps being rotated. Now, look, granted, you can blame Conte for, oh, well, why is he rotating? We've done the same under Jose Mourinho. But yet we all also say, oh, we are also calling for players to be rotated left, right, and centre. So even if we're rotating, we have to bring these guys in, and it just becomes costly. And we can't blame Conte for the lack of quality back there to play his way building up from the back, to get a stamp on the game, to get hold of the game, to build possession in the game, which ultimately leads to chances, which ultimately leads to dominating the game. We can't blame Conte because the players, some of the players that he has to pick or he has to use, can't do it. It's a mentality and a quality issue, not an Antonio Conte issue. Let's not get that mixed up here. Now, the reason why I think the shambles at Man United and Old Trafford came about, ultimately, we couldn't pass the football. We couldn't pass it out from the back. United pressed us. We got scared. We couldn't make simple passes. We couldn't control the ball. We got all hot and flustered. We got panicked. And then that filters onto the midfield, which means instead of them receiving the ball and trying to control the game, which, look, ultimately they didn't use the best of possession when they did get it, but when they're not receiving the ball, they're then left chasing the ball, which ultimately means they end up sitting deeper and deeper and deeper because they're spending their time chasing the ball. Then what happens is we do get the ball. We're kicking it long to Kane and Son, who are isolated. But because we're so deep, we can't actually get players to push up and help them. So even if one of them do win something, there's no one there to pick up the second ball. There's no runners off them. There's no one for them to lay into, to spin and run in behind. And ultimately, the problems stem from the back line. And we've just got to stop being naive to it. Sometimes we've got to stop always putting the blame on the manager. I know straight away, immediately, we're looking for someone to blame. But sometimes you've got to blame the players. Sometimes you just have to. Now, this brings me on to the transfer window. Now, ultimately, I ended up thinking we had a decent transfer window. Now, I know some people are going to go mad, but hear me out on this. Now, if we were having a brutal assessment coming into the summer, we probably needed 15 new players in here. Now, we couldn't do that without it having a negative impact, like it's had at Nottingham Forest, where, okay, they bet Liverpool today, but ultimately they're struggling. Steve Cooper is struggling to find his best 11. And they end up sacking the guy that was in charge of bringing all them players in the summer already. So we could have done that, but then it would have had a negative impact. So I understand we cannot get absolutely everything done in one window. Fully understand that. But look, some of the players we brought in here, ultimately they're struggling to adapt, which I also think we have to give them a bit more time to bed in. Look, I'm disappointed in some of them Premier League proven. I thought they would hit the ground running. Hasn't been the case, but we do have to give them more than 10, 11 games to bet in my opinion. Now, ultimately, I understand being left with the likes of Dyer, Davies, maybe Doherty and Sanchez, because at the time we have to remember we had to get rid of the stuff that was basically forming around the club that just wasn't good. The French mafia, the Welsh mafia, the games of cricket being put out as videos for Spurs fans to watch when we're losing games. So there was there was a bad culture, bad vibe. Players basically doing what they want because they knew they could get Jose sacked. Doing what they want because they knew they could get Nuno sacked. Maybe not taking it so seriously. So because there was a lot of guys here that were too interested in forming cliques, mafias, going around doing what they wanted. And ultimately, even some players we brought in who are no longer here, basically took the piss out of the club, did just done what they wanted, didn't apply themselves. So we're left with some of the likes of Matt Doherty, Davies, Dyer, and maybe Sanchez, granted, because they probably applied themselves in the right way. But that should not be an excuse to demand a better quality here. In fact, someone applying themselves in the right way should be an absolute basic demand. Not even up for discussion. Don't tolerate anything else. It should be the basic. Someone having the right attitude, basically at a football club and doing all the right things, especially with the money they're being paid. So let's not use it as an excuse to maybe keep them around in this squad or overlook that we do need to improve on it. But we also have to understand that this is going to take time. Conte needs more windows to be able to do it. We couldn't have done everything in one window. And I fully understand that. Look, I wasn't happy. There were certain areas I was happy with the window and how we started it. But ultimately, it kind of fell off a cliff. And there was one or two areas where I could foresee being a problem this season that we didn't improve. But ultimately, I could understand we were never going to get everything done in one window. And I just think right now we have to take stock. We've got a mix of 4 different regimes in the squad right now. We just have to give Conte time. We have to give him more windows. And like I said, if it's not under Conte, who's it going to be under? And then you're going into a 5th cycle. And ultimately, you'll end up just being where United are, where Arsenal are, where this is the manager and that's it. You shut up. This is the process. Follow it or just do what you want. Basically, we don't care. So ultimately, I would say to people, do it under the guy that has the proven track record of trophies. And basically, just stop always blaming the manager. Just stop it. Now, look, maybe I could be wrong on the likes of Doherty, Davies, Dyer, Sanchez. Maybe it's not the mentality. Maybe it could be the culture in and around the club. And that still needs to change. Maybe they are good enough, but the mentality is wrong because of the culture set around the club. Maybe so. But either way, I think we'll both agree we have to give a manager here at some stage more than a year, more than 17 months in the job in order to have the success, which, by the way, Conte's had, Jose's had, by the way, which I'll also add, Tottenham is still the only club on his CV where he hasn't won a trophy. Why not do it under guys that have proven track record? Rather than looking for someone to come in and play pretty football, which ultimately we tried before and we didn't win anything. Because when we got to the stage, we didn't have the know-how. We were too naive. So, look, that's my opinions on everything going on right now. I just call for Spurs fans just to show a bit of patience. Just like I said, maybe a bit of a recap, because I know I've just gone on and on and on and on. But maybe a bit of a recap is, the two good things at the club right now, Conte and Paratici. Regardless of your thoughts of the playing squad, the owners, whatever, we can agree Conte and Paratici are two of the good things at the club right now. Two of the reasons why we're back in Champions League football. So let's not get them ran out of the club by our own stupidity. Let's just be patient. The proof is in the pudding. Guardiola didn't win everything with City when he came in. Took time. Took his players. Now, ultimately, they could accelerate the process because of the money they've had. But United under Ferguson had all that success because they gave him time. They could have sacked him. Jurgen Klopp has been given time at Liverpool. Look at his success he's bought them. We don't have Chelsea money where we can afford to bring in the best in class and just hire and fire managers. We have to give something time. So let's give it to the guy that has a proven track record. Let's not take a gamble. Let's just relax, be patient. We're way too reactionary after a loss. What is all the fuss about? Best start in 63 years. Let's just be patient. Give Conte a bit of room, a bit of space to work, a bit of time to implement a squad in his style, his fashion, his philosophy, his DNA, his culture. But also give him time to change that around the club as well. He done it with the fitness. He done it with the way they were eating and everything else. Now we just need to bring in the right mentality and the right quality of players. But let's be patient, because it may not necessarily be greener on the other side, like we thought it would be with Jose, but we ended up with Nuno. Let me know what your thoughts are. No problem with people disagreeing. This is just my thoughts over the course of the day. Not everyone's going to agree with me. I'd love to hear other people's opinions of what's going on. But my main message is just back Conte and come on, you Spurs.